apple butter granola, which is a fantastic way to use up apple butter. And the granola is really flavorful. It's really crunchy and it has these big chunks that I just love. And I'm going to show you how I make it. You'll need old-fashioned oats, some nuts and seeds. I like sliced almonds and pepita pumpkin seeds, some salt, maple syrup, real butter, almond butter, and then the star of the recipe, of course, really thick, delicious apple butter. There's also some cinnamon, vanilla, and dried apple pieces. This recipe starts by combining all the wet ingredients in a medium saucepan. So the maple syrup and then all of the butters, the almond butter, the apple butter, and the regular butter. And I'll put a link to the written recipe in the video description below so you can have that and follow the recipe a little bit easier if you want to make this. And by the way, instead of apple butter, you can make this with pear butter instead, and it is equally delicious. I'm also going to add the salt and the cinnamon to this mixture. I like just a little cinnamon. I don't like the cinnamon to be overpowering. I want the apple to really come through, but if you love cinnamon, you can add a little bit more. I also add the vanilla, and then I'm going to get this heating up and starting to cook. Now, start stirring this right away. If the almond butter is sitting on the bottom of the pot, which it usually kind of is, it will start to burn. So you want to get this moving and stir pretty continuously. This doesn't take long. We're just really trying to melt everything and just heat it up gently. While that's heating between stirrings, I'm going to prepare the pan. I'm using a big half sheet pan, which is about 18 by 13 inches. And I'm just going to line it with a piece of parchment paper and then keep stirring. And once this is turned into a smooth sauce and the butter is melted or almost melted, you can turn off the heat. In a large mixing bowl, I'm going to combine the dry ingredients, which is just the oats and then the nuts and the seeds. If you don't like sliced almonds, you can trade them out for chopped walnuts or pecans, but I'd highly recommend using the pepitas. I don't know, I just love pumpkin seeds and they're really, really good in this recipe. And then I'm just going to give everything a light toss together. And then next, pour the warm apple butter mixture over the oats and the nuts and the seeds. Use a silicone spatula to fold everything together and mix it up really good. It will form kind of a wet, gloppy mess, and that's exactly what we want it to look like. Just keep stirring and mixing it together until you don't see any dry oats left. Oh, and this is a good time to mention that the dried apple pieces are not added until after baking. Do not bake the dried apple pieces. Do not add them to this mixture just quite yet. Now, spread the granola mixture onto your prepared pan. And if you don't have a big pan like this, you can use 2 smaller pans. However, it probably will alter the cooking time just a little bit, so make note of that. How I spread this out on the pan and the first time you stir it after it bakes for a little bit, I think is really valuable to have a video and to see exactly what I'm doing because this is kind of important. I am going to use my spatula, you could also use your fingers too if you wanted, to spread this out and cover pretty much the entire pan, or at least where my paper is. And I want to get this in a very thin and very even layer. And this is what it should look like. Now, I'm going to cook this pretty low and slow in the oven for a couple hours. I'm going to bake this at 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to take around 2 hours. And because the apple butter has so much moisture in it, and this has a lot of wet ingredients in it, I almost want it to dehydrate or kind of dry out in the oven, which is why it takes so long, but it's really mostly hands-off. While that bakes, I'm going to prepare the dried apples. These are apples I dehydrated myself, and if you want to know how to do that, I have a video here on YouTube with all sorts of different ways that you can dehydrate apples. These ones happen to be really thin, which I really enjoy, and so they break apart easily. If your apples are thicker and chewier, you will have to tear them or rip them, but we want them in bite-sized pieces. Okay, the granola has been cooking for 20 minutes, and this is a really crucial part that I think is another one that's really good for you to see. I am going to come in, and this is still very wet, but I'm going to come in with my spatula and flip it over. And my goal is actually to kind of flip it in place, I guess like you're flipping a pancake. And I'm just going to move through this whole pan full of granola, taking one spatula full at a time and flipping it upside down. Once it's all flipped, I'm going to come through and just break it up into pieces. It's more of a separating it into big, craggy chunks. I am aiming for most of the pieces to be less than the size of a quarter. Don't break this up into too small of pieces. I'm not trying to make little crummies. I'm just trying to create a lot of surface area so that it can dry out as easily as possible, but still remain a nice chunky granola. Another 20 minutes has passed. Did I mention we're stirring this every 20 minutes from here on out? Stir it after its first 20 minutes and then every 20 minutes after that. And the goal is just to toss it around and make sure that the bottom sides get flipped to the top and the top gets flipped to the bottom so that it can all dry out evenly. And then again, I just want to spread this back out into a thin, even layer, spreading it out as much as I can, and of course, gonna put it back in the oven. It's been another 20 minutes, so this has been baking for a full hour now, and at this point, I like to get rid of the parchment paper. It's not needed and it kind of just becomes awkward and in the way, so I just gently and carefully pull it out from underneath the granola. And you can see how much drier the granola is starting to look now, which from here on out, it's a lot easier to mix up. It's not so much of a flipping of the wet pancake as it is just stirring around the pieces every time. My granola is done, and mine always takes between 2 hours and 2 hours and 20 minutes. And you can see how toasty it is. And that is an indication that it's done. When it starts to look a little bit deeper brown, you can see the oats and the nuts are toasted, and it's perfect. It will still be a little bit soft to the touch when it's warm out of the oven, but as it cools, it will harden and get very crunchy. It's a really, really beautiful granola, and it has big chunks in it. It has some chunks and some smaller pieces. It's incredibly flavorful, and it's a great snacking granola. I am not somebody who likes to put milk over my granola. I just like to eat it as a snack or a dessert, so I like these big, big pieces in it. Once the granola has cooled, make sure it's completely cool. You can sprinkle the apple pieces on it, and then I just like to take my fingers and kind of fluff it and gently mix them in. And from here, it's ready to package up. I prefer to store my granola in a glass jar. It just needs to be something airtight, and it will last for at least a couple weeks in a good container. That is apple butter granola. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you could give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you are the first to know whenever a new video is posted.